Hey everybody, Dr. G here. I'm a clinical and forensic psychologist as well as a body language expert, but today we're not analyzing body language. Today I'm going to be explaining why the Epstein jailhouse video has a missing minute, and this is wild, so get ready. Before we get started, a couple of quick things. One, I wanted to make sure you know none of this constitutes a psychological evaluation of any kind. These are just my opinions. In addition to that, I do want to remind you to like and subscribe if you want to see more content just like this. All right, let's go. So if you've watched my past couple of videos talking about Jeffrey Epstein, you'll know that I said that I thought the minute missing was no big deal, that it was probably just software, because I tend to go by the principle that the simplest explanation is probably the correct one. And to me, in 10 hours of footage, the one precise minute that's missing between 11:59 and 12 seems to me to be too even and too round to be anything other than just coincidence. To me, it seemed like it likely was due to software. But I'm not too big to admit when I think that I am wrong, and in this situation, I think I was wrong. Now, I stand by the fact that I do believe that Pam Bondi, in my last video, I said that she believes that that missing minute is innocuous and that was not done on purpose. I actually do think she believes that. That being said, we're about to get into some very deep waters to figure out exactly why I think that missing minute is far more meaningful than I thought it was before. What we're going to do first is watch a little bit of this video around this time. We're going to talk a little bit about what we're observing, and then we're going to go to the Office of the Inspector General of the Department of Justice's report on Epstein's death. And that's where things get really interesting. And so we're going to compare some of these things. Let's jump right in. I'll provide commentary as we go. But just understand, by the time we're done with this, you're going to have a very different perception of that missing minute. So as you can see, leading up right here, 11:58, 30 seconds or so, right now, the correctional officers are sitting at the desk right in the back here. And I also want you to keep in mind that you could just see somebody move a little bit, actually. On the right over here, this is where Jeffrey Epstein's cell is. We're going to be looking at some schematics and some pictures of all of that once we get to the report. But understand, back here and to the right just a little bit, that's exactly where his cell is. You can actually see his cell from where the correctional officers are sitting. Now, the quality of the video is so poor that it's hard to see, but it looks like there's one person right here, and I believe there's someone else to the left. We just saw the time skip. We'll watch that again. Now, the most important stuff doesn't happen at the time skip, because I think it's very possible that the most important stuff happened during the time skip, but it's going to take a minute for me to fully explain why that is. But let's look again where we can see that both of the correctional officers are accounted for right here. So 3, 2, and then there's the time jump. Okay, so now you see one of the correctional officers moving around a little bit. Once again, quality is abysmal, but you can at least detect motion. By the way, if you see any time jumps outside of that missing minute, I edit these videos for time, so it may jump around some. That is not meaningful. That's just my editing. But I want you to keep in mind, the Office of the Inspector General stated that between 10:40 p.m. and 6:30 a.m., nobody approached Tier L, which is where Jeffrey Epstein is. They said nobody went up to it at all. So during that time, absolutely nobody should have gone up there. Now, as you can see right here, well, you can't really see, but there is motion. From what I can tell, there are two people sitting here. That's both of the correctional officers. Now, what's supposed to be happening is they are supposed to be doing checks every 30 minutes. And part of the problem is that they falsified that. That has been verified. They did falsify that they didn't actually do these checks. So what we should be seeing is them going up and checking. But they verifiably did not do that. We can locate their whereabouts. At no point do you see them walk up to Tier L. At no point do you see them actually walk over to Jeffrey Epstein's area. So basically we're 1 o'clock now, and I've combed through the entire hour. You've seen correctional officers walk on and off some, but you haven't seen anybody walk up to Tier L where Epstein is staying. So what we've established before going to the report is that between the hours of 12 and 1, you didn't see anybody go up there. You didn't observe any of the officers go up there. At no point did they go up to check or anything like that. And that's extremely important when it comes to what we're about to read. So now we're going to look at the Department of Justice's own Inspector General's review and report on Jeffrey Epstein's death. This includes a lot of really interesting things, and we're just going to jump right into it. I'm going to be highlighting a number of things, and then we're going to, at the end, talk about it all and talk about why it matters. Now, there's a lot of things that stand out in this report, some consequential and some probably less so. Like this first part may not be so consequential, but I want to point it out because I'm trying to be thorough. On July 23rd, and this is not when he died on August 10th. On July 23rd, he was found with an orange cloth around his neck. And here's a quote. Epstein first told MCC New York staff that he thought his cellmate had tried to kill him, but later said he did not know what occurred and did not want to talk about how he had sustained his injuries. Once again, he could have been being manipulative, but I want to point out everything. So I'm going to be pointing out everything that I can. Some stuff is probably more relevant than others, but I at least want to make sure that I'm thorough. So the first thing I'm going to point out is that on July 23rd, now keep in mind he died on August 10th, so this was a little bit before then. On July 23rd, after he was found with an orange rope around his neck or an orange cloth around his neck, Epstein first told MCC New York staff he thought his cellmate had tried to kill him, but later said he did not know what occurred and did not want to talk about how he sustained his injuries. We're going to continue to get into more interesting things as we go. You're going to see shoe referenced a lot, and that's the housing unit. So just understand that's what that means. But it says here, and it says repeatedly throughout this, that the OIG found that the shoe staff did not conduct any of the 30-minute rounds after about 10:40 p.m. on August 9th. So as they say over and over again, between 10:40 and 6:30, nobody that was part of that staff went up there. Another thing I want to point out when they're talking about the video cameras, they're saying anyone entering or attempting to enter Epstein's shoe tier from the shoe common area would have been picked up by the video camera, the one that we saw, which, as you can see, the video quality is abysmal. It is only barely perceptible when people that aren't trying to be invisible, people that don't care about being seen, walk right up to it, and you can still barely see them. So I'm not sure that I would agree with that assessment. I think that you could pretty easily get by without having been seen on that camera. Between about 10:40 on August 9th and 6:30 a.m. on August 10th, no one was seen entering Epstein's cell tier from the shoe common area. They've been very, very consistent about this. Now, this is probably something that's more common knowledge, but I at least want to go over it because it's insane to me. At approximately 7 p.m., contrary to BOP policy, but with the permission of the unit manager, Epstein is permitted to place an unmonitored telephone call to a number with a New York City area code, purportedly to speak with his mother. In actuality, Epstein speaks with someone who he allegedly has a personal relationship. After the call, Epstein is returned to his cell where he remains without a cellmate. So he was allowed to make an unmonitored jail call, which I didn't even know you could do, at 7 p.m. that same night. And we're going to see later within this report that the whole New York City area code thing doesn't really make any sense. And even though this is repetitive, I do want to repeat this part, which is that shoe staff do not conduct midnight, 3 a.m., or 5 a.m. inmate counts or any of the 30-minute rounds from 12 a.m. to 6:30 a.m. So the last time any of them would have been up there is 10:40. Now, this document goes over the way that this place is laid out, and we're going to get into some detail about this, but this right here at least shows basically how you can enter and exit the special housing unit. And where this is relative to Epstein's cell, I'm going to get into. It would be too complicated to try to explain on this page because there's some really good diagrams of that in a minute. But as you can see right here, this shows in great detail how you can get in and out of this area. So if you look at these documents right here, you'll see that Tier L, that is where Jeffrey Epstein is housed. And if you look directly to the left of that, there's a little desk with a seat, which is where the officers are hanging out. And so you can see the line of sight to Epstein's cell is there. I mean, it's right there. And as you can see, the stairs are pretty much directly in front of that desk. So here's a photograph if you want to see what these stairs look like close up. Once again, L tier is where Jeffrey Epstein is housed. So if we're to continue to, I know the order of this is a little bit weird, but I'm trying to go in the order of the report. But this also stands out. On July 24th, after the incident on July 23rd, let's get into a little bit more detail about what Jeffrey Epstein claimed. So when he was being assessed, the staff psychologist said it was unclear whether Epstein had placed a string around his neck or if someone else did. In addition to that, according to BOP records, Epstein told the medical staff he did not want to talk about how he sustained injuries, but believed his cellmate had something to do with it. Obviously, that could be a lie. But what's even more interesting to me is the Bureau of Prison Special Investigative Services opened an investigation into this incident, but was unable to determine whether Epstein harmed himself or had been assaulted. So it was still unclear to them, even after investigating it, what had happened. A search of Epstein's cell following his death revealed Epstein had excess prison blankets, linens, and clothing for his cell, and that some had been ripped to create nooses. He had, not only did he have things he shouldn't have, he had excess blankets and linens, which they'd said is because he, ultimately I'll just go ahead and explain. Essentially, they're saying that because there originally was supposed to be another cellmate, that those were left there for the other cellmate. But the idea that he basically had double the amount of linens and blankets and so forth after what was alleged on July 23rd is crazy. So here's a picture of what his cell block or his tier looked like. And as you can see by this graph over here, or this little picture over here, Epstein's cell was in the very, very front. And this, interestingly, is the view from the correctional officer's seated area. As you can see from that graph, they sit here. This is what it would look like. So they can basically see where that red circle is, where Jeffrey Epstein's cell is. And then this would be the view from Jeffrey Epstein's cell, so he can look down and see the officer's station. Now I want to highlight a little bit about what the correctional officers were actually doing that night. So as it says, that the Noel and Thomas can be seen at the shoe officer station, moving to the shoe common area and into the shoe laundry entrance and exit areas throughout the morning of August 10th, which we've seen on the video. I think that the laundry entrance and exit, I believe that's probably room the 46, the one that's right up against the camera. I'm not sure about that, but that's about the only thing that would make sense to me. OIG analysis of the activity on the shoe computers revealed that Noel used the computer periodically throughout the night, including to search the internet for furniture sales and benefit websites and to read a news article about Epstein, which is interesting. I wonder why that night she was reading an article about Epstein. Thomas used the computer briefly around 1 a.m. and 6 a.m. to search for motorcycle sales and sports news. I think what stands out about that to me is that they were Googling Epstein. I wish that they would include specifically what the news article was, what time it was. Those types of things, they seem like relevant details. All right, let's review Epstein being allowed to make an unmonitored telephone call on August 9th. We referred to that earlier. Let's get into more specifics. So BOP policy requires that all inmate telephone calls be made through the inmate telephone system. BOP records reflect that Epstein placed an unrecorded, unmonitored telephone call to a telephone number in the local 646 area code using a non-inmate telephone system line on August 9th, 2019, from 6:58 p.m. to 7:19 p.m. So you got about 21 minutes. And no other BOP records exist regarding the unmonitored call, including the identity of the person called or a summary of the conversation. So basically, they let Epstein make an unrecorded call. They plugged in the phone, and I'm going to just read this part. According to the unit manager, a male answered, and the unit manager handed the receiver to Epstein. The unit manager heard Epstein say, "Hey, how you doing? How's everything?" The unit manager admitted he should have verified who was on the line, as Epstein had requested to make a telephone call to speak with his mother, and it was a male who answered the phone. The unit manager said he could not verify the phone number because he believed that Epstein did not have his inmate telephone system account set up and did not have any phone numbers associated with his account. Incredibly strange. Incredibly strange. So check out this part. This is where the whole area code thing gets very strange. So the OIG investigation determined that Epstein did not, in fact, speak with his mother, who, according to public records, died in 2004. Okay, so he actually spoke with Individual 1, who declined to be interviewed by the OIG. Individual 1's lawyer told the U.S. Attorney's Office for the Southern District of New York during an attorney proffer that Individual 1 spoke with Epstein on August 9th, 2019, at about 7 p.m. for approximately 20 minutes, which is confirmed. We have that. Individual 1's attorney proffer was that Individual 1 was in the country of Belarus at the time of the call. So, did they patch him through from a New York number to Belarus? Like, this is, once again, incredibly strange. Individual 1's attorney told the U.S. Attorney's Office that during the telephone call, Epstein told Individual 1 that the press had gotten crazy and they discussed personal things such as books, music, and hygiene while incarcerated. According to the representation by Individual 1's counsel, Epstein told Individual 1, "They are trying to keep me safe," and that his case would take a little longer than he originally thought. He told Individual 1 that he loved her to be strong and that he would not be able to call her again for another month. Now, this part right here, aside from that whole weird Belarus thing, they are trying to keep me safe. Now, this seems like a pretty wild statement to me. They are trying to keep me safe. Now, I suppose that could be in the context of they're trying to keep him safe from himself, but that would be a strange thing to say. I have a feeling that is not what that means. So, another thing that's very strange and really stands out in this report. So now this is getting more confusing because the first person said they heard a male voice. In this, he refers to Individual 1 as her. So now we've got conflicting information. And then we got one last piece of information that I find really concerning. The Northeast Regional Director told the OIG that if Epstein's call was authorized by an MCC New York official, then it should have been done on a speakerphone while being monitored by a staff member, and the call should have been logged and a record of the call should have been created. Okay, that's pretty much expected. The Northeast Regional Director said Epstein's unmonitored telephone call was extremely concerning because we don't know what happened on that call. It could have potentially led to the incident, Epstein's death, but we will never know. It's quite a bold statement, particularly because it's not brought up again. So now we're going to talk about the part that matters about the missing minute. And there's a little bit to cover here. It's not just this one guy. So we're going to be covering a couple of different inmates, but we're going to start with inmate 5. Hopefully this helps you better understand why I am now a lot more skeptical about that missing minute than I was before. The OIG participated in interviews of 3 inmates assigned to the same shoe tier as Epstein at the time of his death, who were housed in cell opposite Epstein's cell and therefore had a direct line of sight to Epstein's cell. Keep in mind, these interviews would have all been done separately. One such inmate was inmate 5, who was assigned to a cell directly across from Epstein's cell on the left side of the tier, who told the OIG he could see all the cells on the right side of L tier where Epstein was housed. Now, that being said, if you look at what the housing looks like, the door is solid with a little window, so he would physically have to walk over and look through that little hole to be able to see the rest of the cell. It's not like he could just look over and see everything. Inmate 5 believed a count was last conducted within the shoe on August 9th, 2019, a little before 12 a.m. Now, keep in mind, 10:40 was the last time anybody went in there, which to me is not a little before 12 a.m. And on top of that, I assume these guys don't have watches. I don't know if there's a clock in there or not. Probably not. But we're pretty good at telling gross amounts of time. Within an hour or so, we're pretty good at estimating time, even when we're sleeping. The human body is very good at detecting these kinds of things, even if you're not looking at sunlight. So the fact that he thought that it was a little before 12 a.m., I think you should pay attention to. In addition to that, places like this are very routine. So they're going to be specific times. Things usually happen. So if everybody's in their cells by a certain time, they'll be used to that. So this should be a pretty close approximation to the time. Inmate 5 believed a count was last conducted within the shoe on August 9th, 2019, a little before midnight or 12 a.m., and said that no additional count was conducted after that time. Inmate 5 did not see anyone or hear anyone go into Epstein's cell on the night of August 9th or the morning of August 10th prior to the male CO discovering Epstein. Now let's go to inmate 6. His is fairly similar in terms of where he's located, so I won't read all that, but he said that they never conducted the 30-minute rounds. Inmate 6 believed the COs last checked on inmates in the shoe on August 10th between 12:30 a.m. and 1 a.m. Inmate 6 did not observe anyone entering Epstein's cell after Epstein returned from his legal visit, did not hear noise that night, and said Epstein's door was not opened during the night. So we now have 2 inmates on the same tier saying that around midnight, someone came to Epstein's cell, that was the last time they did any sort of checks. So you could say, well, they're wrong. It was 10:40. They just don't know what time it is. And maybe that's the case. But this does not seem close to me. They didn't say 11:30. Both of them guessed between midnight and 1 a.m. or slightly before midnight and 1 a.m. So we're talking about a time frame that is nothing like 10:40, and I think is very interesting that they believe that happened. In addition, the OIG and the FBI interviewed 7 inmates assigned to other tiers in the shoe, none of whom had any direct knowledge of how Epstein died. These inmates consistently reported that the shoe officers did not systematically conduct the counts and rounds as required on the evening Epstein died, and the last round was either around 9:30 to 10 p.m. or 12:30 to 1. Several inmates told the OIG that before Epstein died, the shoe staff never conducted rounds at night. So once again, now it doesn't say how many of them, there's other people, there's more inmates that somehow believe that there was somebody there between 12:30 and 1 a.m. And just so you can see, here is the angle of the camera relative to Epstein's cell. So as you can see on this little diagram here, Epstein's cell is right there. The camera cuts off right at the stairs, not in front of Epstein's cell. So if somebody really wanted to scoot by, they could come on the right side of the stairs and right over here, and you wouldn't actually see them on camera. This gives you maybe a better idea of the stairway to Tier L. This is their diagram of that. And then below that, this is the officer station, which if you weren't able to see on the video, because the video looks terrible, this is what we're talking about. So if you look at this red circle right here, that's actually the camera. So behind the camera, is actually another room, which I think is interesting. So I had no idea. I had no frame of reference that there was actually something behind the camera as well. Now, there's one thing that is missing from this report that I think is extremely important. We were told that every night a minute is missing because of the way that the cameras work. And when I reviewed the video originally, I thought, okay, that seems logical enough. I hadn't heard that explanation yet, but the time seemed too round. Nowhere in this is it mentioned that there is a missing minute. This is a thorough investigation by the Office of the Inspector General of the Department of Justice. And even though they might have had the same conclusion that a minute's not that big of a deal, that would have been mentioned in this report somewhere. Somebody should have noticed that, because they do go through in very detailed ways and talk about what they observed. So the idea that that was not mentioned and now that's their explanation is curious. Another thing that is curious is that now we have multiple inmates talking about that somebody came on around between midnight and 1, that was the last time somebody checked on them. Nowhere does it indicate the questions they were asked. It does not say who came in to check on them. It doesn't say which officer they thought it was. It doesn't give any details whatsoever at all, other than vaguely between midnight and 1, 2 of the inmates reported somebody there, and then the other inmates, of several inmates, it doesn't specify how many of them, also believed between 12:30 and 1, somebody was in the unit. All right, we're going to stop reviewing here and talk about what we found. So when I thought midnight is too even of a number, we probably shouldn't pay that much attention to it, that was a mistake. I should have paid more attention to that, because it seemed like, as I said, the simplest explanation is it was probably the right one, and 1 minute missing, that's probably a normal thing. Nowhere in this report is that missing minute noted. Nowhere does it say that the DVRs skip a minute every night. Now, that seems like the kind of detail 128-page report that would probably be in there. So do I think that missing minute is related to all of this? Given that it wasn't noted in the report, which means maybe it wasn't missing back then, given the other facts that have been talked about by the inmates, and given everything else that we looked at today, it's hard to imagine that missing minute is not starting to look a lot more intentional than it did a couple of days ago. That doesn't mean that the people at the top, like Pam Bondi, don't actually believe that the missing minute is not explainable, because that's probably what she's been told. So when I talked about yesterday that she believed that, I actually think that's true. She, I think, found that to be a very compelling point. Her body language suggested that she really thought that was an important point, and they were going to go through and demonstrate and prove that missing minute is a normal thing. Although at this point, that seems almost impossible, because according to this, they've upgraded all of their DVR systems, so they can't go now and take clips of recordings that they do now and show that missing minute. That would make absolutely no sense, because everything's been updated. And I would be shocked if they kept records of all of that older stuff. So how they're going to prove that, I don't know. I'll be very curious myself if or how they try to prove that. So hopefully you were able to follow everything I covered today. I know it was a lot. If you have any other thoughts or there's anything else you want me to check out, I'm more than happy to continue to cover this. And if there's anything else you want me to cover, please let me know in the comments below. Last thing before we get finished up is I do want to remind you to like and subscribe if you want to see more content just like this. All right, thanks for watching.